Now then, everybody, how are you doing? Just a bit of a change this afternoon, trying something a little bit different. I've brought my father along, someone who I'm immensely proud of as my father. Is nearly 90-year-old in December. Now he can tell us all a lot about his life. He's got a lot of experience in life of hardships from many years gone by. When he started out in life and the hardships, he didn't have what was described as a particularly great education. It was what you'd call a limited education anyway. I think a lot of the time as a boy they tended to be doing a lot of chores and work started pretty early when you was a young boy. But anyway, I'll introduce you to my dad. This is my dad sat here with me now. He's called Bob. He's a bit of a character in the village as well. Everybody knows him. He's a lovely chap. But what I wanted to say, Dad, you're nearly 90 years old in December. You must have experienced so much in your work life. What was the hardest job you've ever done?
The farm work, yes, worked on the land, yes, yeah. And I started off, I did a bit ploughing with horses and carried on like this. Then later on, as I got a bit older, in fact I was carrying oats, 12-stone sacks from a machine end, 50 yards across the yard, up a ladder, tipping it in the granary.
12 stone must have been a really. I mean, I can't imagine trying to lift 12 stone now. I mean, obviously I'm disabled now. I wouldn't be able to do that. But earlier on in my life, lifting 12 stone and carrying it upstairs, that must have been. It must have been a right struggle.
Well, it was very heavy, but not in comparison with all the other wheat, with corn like wheat and things like that. That was all heavier.
But I suppose again, I suppose the fact was, I think you once told me, didn't you, that on instance like that, you was carrying the oats from the machine, and there was only you, and you had about 50 yards. I think you said you had to walk with a bag, and you had to carry it up, go 50 yards up some steps, then get back before the other bag was filled. And the problem you had was that the bags was getting filled before before you could get back to them. And you asked the farmer something. What was it you asked the farmer?
I asked the farmer, I said, when I get back, the machine, the corn's running over the top of the sacks, so I'd immediately take it off and set off again. And I was walking back and forwards, and by the time I got back, I said, could he have something to help me, because the bag's running over when I get back. He says, instead of walking, walk back. Yeah.
No, run back, did you say?
Back,
yeah, run back, yeah.
Yeah, run back,
yeah.
That's what he said,
I mean, this highlights, doesn't it, again, how times were back in the day, how bad it was. I mean, when we look at things like health and safety, carrying a 12-stone bag up some stairs as a young man, it must have been very hard. I know people say, well, back in them days they were tougher, and I think there's a certain degree of truth in that. Youngsters were brought up pretty hard and pretty tough, but that doesn't excuse that sort of system, and it's just really what I would call very exploitative of a working man on a farm. And quite shocking. I mean, you look at the elephants. What happens if you start running back with a sack like that, and you stumble on the stairs and fall? What happens then? There was no health and safety on the farm or anything to go by, and the farmer would have been just mad that you'd fell. But then all he would have done was his old care would have been, well, I'll just have to try and get somebody else to do the job, and that would have been the attitude. And what I want to relate that to, when you look at the modern day now, is this is a sort of practice that's coming back. Over the years, we've had trade unions and things that have helped working class in not just on farms, in all manner of industries, where health and safety has been brought in to change things. Guards on machines and things where people was killed with bad machinery and stuff, and all these improvements were brought in by trade unions. Tory governments never wanted to have these things because they all saw health and safety and anything like that as a cost to the business. They never thought about the actual worker who might get injured or even killed. Deaths in industry were massive and very widespread. But when the trade unions came in and made the changes that they did and fought for those rights that were very hard fought, people struggled, people had to make huge sacrifices. But when those things was won, we now, to this day, we're benefiting from that. So we benefited from that generation. My dad and his father, who had to make all those struggles, these are the people, these are the giants, the shoulders that we all stand on today. I'm immensely proud of my father. I really am. And to know the struggle that he's had in life. But anyway, we'll move on. What advice would you have for young people starting a new job, Dad?
Well, I don't know really what they would have to.
Join a union, do you think, maybe?
They would pick a job and they would join a union who would look after them. I myself, I mean, I was in a farm workers union, but
it wasn't a particularly great union, was it?
To me, that they was on the side of the farmer.
Yeah, they were the worst. And it's got to be said, it's all got to be said, there are some unions that are not always great, but there's another way you could often. Unions can sometimes only be as strong as the members, which is an important factor. But if you look back then, it was the early days, and most of the people that were on the farm and whatnot, like we've already said, there was no great education. People didn't really understand things, so maybe a lot of those union men were probably yes men and just said yes, 3 bags full to the owner. But that doesn't take away from the fact that as years went on and the trade union movements got better, members got stronger, they got more unity and stuck together, it's been a massive plus point. But it's important to have highlighted that point, you know. I think that's enough talking on the work life, unless there's anything else you wanted to add about work.
No, none of it worked on till I got married and still worked in a tied cottage. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that was how much was that to rent?
That was 5 shillings a week for a tied cottage, and that was out to come out of my wages of £7 a week.
Right. Right. It's quite staggering when you look at those numbers, isn't it? It really is. And I think then later, after that was your first experience of having a house, but it was very hard to be able to afford to get a house and whatnot. But it's got to be said, back then, I mean, what year would we be talking about then? Would that be?
I just can't pinpoint what year it was actually. I found because I've never looked into it.
Yeah. Struggling to remember, mind you. Yeah. You could be excused that when you're nearly 90 years old.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. But again, at least, even as long ago as that, it was possible, you know, for even somebody working on a farm, they was able to get like a tied cottage. After you'd been in the tied cottage, I think you then did manage to buy a house. Can you remember what you paid for your first house?
£720.
Right, I mean, yeah. It's staggering, that, isn't it? And you had to, what was your deposit you had to pay on that?
£50 deposit, which my wife's great uncle gave us the money to do it.
Oh, yeah. That was, you know, that was nice. So again, you needed a little bit of assistance, but at the end of the day, it was still possible to get a house, and you was able to start a family. And start building for the future, and you know, and life has been a struggle. You've never hid from that fact, have you?
No, I haven't. No.
But it's worth saying, throughout your life, you've known Labour governments, you've known Conservative governments. Which one do you think you had a easier time under?
I've been a Labour voter all my life, and I shall never vote Tory in my life. Because
the Tories, in your view, the Tories never did anything for the working man. In fact, quite the opposite. And while we can all not be particularly struck on the way the Labour Party is at the moment. At the end of the day, anything's got to be better than what we've currently got. So, you know.
Yeah, my father told me, if you vote Tory, grind the working man down. That's what he's always saying, yes, yeah.
I mean, there was another thing I remember you once telling me about the farmers telling your father how to vote and that they must go and vote Conservative. And I think there was a story where the farmer had said to your dad, "I'll give you a lift to the polling station as long as you put your cross in the right place." Well, your dad responded and said, "You're all right. I'll put the cross where I want to put it, and I'll go on my bike."
Yeah, well, that was true. He was, the man was Hope Barton, the man who run the estate, and they took my mother to vote, and they said, "We'll take you as long as you vote for the right people." And I said, they also said to my father, "We'll take you as well." They said, "Don't bother," because I was voting for somebody different to you, so I shall go on my bike. Yeah,
Brilliant,
yeah.
absolutely brilliant. And I've got to say, back then, it was quite brave to do that, because there were a lot of cases across the country, it was pretty widespread, that farmers insisted on their workers voting Conservative, and while it was it's always been a private ballot, many farm workers were so scared that that's what they would do. They would just go along and vote for whoever the boss told them to do it. I mean, if that's democracy, well, it's just unbelievable. But this was how it used to be. And we look at the way things are going now. We're looking at how difficult it is for youngsters to get jobs and whatnot. They're bringing 0-hour contracts in. There's reports of people at Amazon that are not allowed to go for a toilet break. They're having to have a plastic bottle with them to go for to toilet while they're working online and packing boxes, etc. I mean, this is an absolute disgrace, and this is why it's important that we need to keep trade unions. You know, that's just another example, and there's thousands of examples. But anyway, we'll move on. Did you recommend having children, Dad?
Well, yes, we did, and also I got a lovely daughter, very good.
No trouble, was she?
No.
If I remember right, I can't ever remember my sister being in trouble for anything. She,
No.
you know, she was one of the best behaved people I've ever known. It was amazing, but
The problem started with the boys, I'm afraid. I mean, I sometimes I used to think it might have been an advantage to play with myself instead of bothering.
yeah, I can sort of understand that. I've got to say, I mean, while I'm a lovely person nowadays, as you can all see, in my younger days I wasn't a particularly well-behaved child, and I did require quite a bit of discipline in comparison to my sister. I've got to say, my brother was worse behaved than me, and sometimes I think my fault was I maybe took after my brother too much. I think it was my brother that made me a bad behaved child. But you know, that said, Alan did sort himself out a lot sooner than I did. He went into the military, and I'm not a big passionate believer in the military, but I've got to say, it did sort my brother out in terms of his discipline and everything. But I've got to say, it's been a joke in the family for a long time, as my dad's always said. It was not a problem having a daughter, but the two boys were a complete nightmare. He didn't know what he was waking up to on the next day. So your advice would be, if you can guarantee having a daughter, that's okay. But if it's sons, give it a miss.
It is okay. It's okay, but going back to again about on the farm, a lorry load of peas came, and there was me and a man called Les Adelaide. We was helping carry these peas. There was 19 stone in a bag, and we carried them up granary steps. And by the time we'd finished, we had a job to stand, which I think sometimes look back and think maybe that's how I suffered up having to have a new knee So Crown such a terrific weight.
I mean, to think, I was thinking the 12 stone was bad enough, but a 19 stone bag of peas, it's slavery and inhuman. Yes, they were being paid a pittance, but it was almost tantamount to slavery, and the dangers and the injuries that must have done to the people. I mean, it's quite shocking and scary, really. But anyway, thanks for pointing that out to me, Dad. You know, again, that's another important thing for people to understand what life was like. But moving on to something a bit more light-hearted. My dad's always liked football. He's been a big football fan all his life. In fact, going back to when I was 7-year-old, he started taking me to Scunthorpe United. Again, I've mentioned about my behaviour as a child. One of the reasons I remember my dad saying to me, right, I'm going to take you to watch Scunthorpe United. And I thought, oh, blooming heck, that's going to be... He says, what I'm going to do is whenever you misbehave and you're bad, you're going to go watch Scunthorpe United, because that's as good a punishment as any to go and watch Scunthorpe United, and that's a memory that's stuck with me for so many years. And so true, to be fair, but, you know, this was this was life. But one of the things why I wanted to bring this topic up was because after the ladies' football this year, Dad's got really interested into the ladies' football, and I think I'm right in saying, Dad, you watched every game, and you was so more passionate about the England team than you was the England men's team.
Every game what I was possible to see.
Yeah. And what was your favourite part of the game, of watching the ladies' games, particularly in that final? What was the best part of the game, would you say?
Well, when they won, it was marvellous. It was fantastic. And then the lady pulled off her shirt, and she ran swinging it in her above her head. And I think myself, I should never have booked her for it, because it made my day.
Did you feel the same when the men take their shirt off?
Didn't make a difference.
Well, thank you, Dad. Anyway, the last one now is, if you could have your life again, Dad, what would you change? I think you'd say, I'll just prompt you this in case you forget. You said to me once that you wish you'd gone into the forces. Why was that?
Yes, I wished I'd gone into the forces, and the reason I didn't, I was advised by my father, because while he was on the land, you didn't have to go, yeah. But I always missed out, and I would have preferred to have gone into the army. I should have gone look around. I should have got my driving license, HGV driving license, to study.
And didn't you say possibly get another trade? Possibly you was also interested in being a joiner, or?
Well, I was always interested in being a joiner or a bloke who do roofing and things like that. But I don't know if going into the army would have given me them.
The thing is, there would have been opportunities for better education, especially because your education earlier on in life wasn't particularly great. It was a very small village school. The opportunities would have been greater. You've spent all your life, you've always worked hard. Like you say, you worked on the farm, and then you've been a lorry driver for the rest of your life. You're retired. You've always worked hard for your family and you've always provided a roof over our head. And while we weren't a particularly well-off family, we never went without enough food on the table. You know, we was brought up the right way, in a firm, disciplined way. We was taught to respect people. I can't fault how I was brought up, and I've got to say, while, you know, I've got to say I didn't always have an easy time with my mum. Later on in life that got better, we improved. I lost my mum sort of 4 years ago to cancer, bless her. But, you know, we'd moved on from our original arguments over life and whatnot, and, you know, it's like now I miss her dearly, but I'm proud of the way my parents brought me up, and I'm proud that my dad's come and sat here with me today. And I'd like to thank him for sitting here with me and talking to me and sharing some of those stories with us. I think it's important. The context is really, I wanted people out there to see somebody that's had a life, they've had a hard life, a pretty decent, hard-working life, and the hardship that they've had in those years, you know, is self-evident. But also showing that back then it was possible to have a job, it was possible to get a house. Yes, it was hard, but they could. That's not something that's been afforded to the youngsters of today. Young people now, like I've said in previous videos, there's people at 35 that are still having to live at home with their parents. They can't even afford to get on the renting market. There isn't enough houses for them to rent because we stopped building social housing. So that's not affordable anymore. And the fact that they don't build enough, but it's because of a rigged capitalist system that wants to keep a low amount of building stock because that keeps prices high. It's a rigged market, but it does nothing to serve those young people that want to get on, want to start a life, want to have a family, just like my mum and dad did. That's been taken away from them. Now, what sort of future is that going to be for people in Britain? It's quite shocking. So again, like I've said on previous videos, next time there's an election, when you get to that ballot box, just have a little thought about my dad, have a little thought about the way life was. Think of the changes that the Labour movement have done for working class people. And just think, when you go and put a cross in that box, all right, the opposition are not particularly great, but it's still got to be better than voting Conservative.
And just to make this point, if I could do, here I am past my sell-by date, but one thing, it's fingers crossed, I should like to see the end of capitalism, the worst thing that ever happened.
Solidarity, Dad, solidarity.
I've been a socialist all my life, and I will never change.
And I obviously followed in my dad's footsteps and proud to do so. So again, we'll end it there. If you could, please subscribe. If you can share the video and like. But all have a nice day. Take care. Thank you very much. Goodbye.